That's right, reminding you, reminding me. For the first sutta class on this retreat, I have chosen an easy sutta. I just read this out in Oxford just a couple of weeks ago. It's one of my favourite little teachings because it's called Bahiya's teaching, and it shows a little very well known teaching, very profound, very deep, but often misunderstood. And so I've presented this little sutta class on Bahiya's teaching and brought in a few other teachings which are in other parts of the suttas to bring them together so there's a coherent understanding of what was being said here. And it builds up many, many, many different parts of the Buddha's teachings on the path to enlightenment. And I always found it very inspiring and also really interesting. So I hope you'll understand this and appreciate it. And because I put it together 4 or 5 weeks ago, that it's fresh in my mind, actually I'm being lazy. So I don't have to contemplate it, think about it, analyze it again. It's just what happened, what I explained a little while ago. Now can you all see it on the screen behind me? Excellent. So what I'm going to do will be reading it out, and as I read it out, if you could scroll down when it needs to be scrolled down. But because it is teachings of the Buddha, I always like to respect them by doing a little Namo Tassa first of all. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. So this teaching is given the name Bahiya's teaching. And this was the Buddha teaching Bahiya. This is from the Udana, part of the Khuddaka Nikaya, in the Sutta Pitaka. Bahiya, you should train yourself thus. In the seen will be merely what is seen. In the heard will be merely what is heard. In the sensed, there will be merely what is sensed. In the cognized, will be merely what is cognized. Practicing in this way, Bahiya, you will not be because of that. When you are not because of that, you will not be in that. When you are not in that, then you will be neither here, nor beyond, nor in between the two. Just this is the end of suffering. Through this brief teaching, Bahiya was immediately enlightened. That's in Udana, first section, 10th Sutta. Bahiya was not a monk. The sutta does not record him giving dana, nor taking refuge in the triple gem, nor keeping any precepts. Moreover, the sutta has no mention at all of Bahiya ever meditating, let alone reaching Ajahn, one of the deep meditations. Yet after receiving a very brief teaching from the Buddha, Bahiya became fully enlightened, an arahat, within seconds. Scroll up a bit. This episode is very well known in Buddhist circles, because it seems to make enlightenment so easy. It appears that you don't need to renounce. You can be miserly and not give any dana. No ceremonies such as that of taking refuge are required. Precepts are unnecessary, and even meditation can be avoided. What a relief for some. All you need is intelligence, and everyone thinks that they're intelligent. This makes Bahiya's teaching both attractive and notorious. As usual, there is more to the story than is recorded in the sutta. It is often the case that the suttas record only the highlights of a long episode. Just like the wedding photos do not record the first meeting, the dating, and the proposal, so many suttas do not record all that occurred before the finale. So what is the full story of Bahiya? How can we put the finale, captured for posterity in the Udana, into its full context? Fortunately, the whole story is recorded in the Apadana, past lives of the Arahats, and in the commentaries. And straight away, I would ask you, well, I just read it out, I'll read it out again. Bahiya, you should train yourself thus. In the seen will be merely what is seen. In the heard will be merely what is heard. In the sense will be merely what is sensed. In the cognized will be merely what is cognized. Practicing in this way, Bahiya, you will not be because of that. When you are not because of that, you will not be in that. And when you are not in that, then you will be neither here nor beyond nor in between the two. Just this is the end of suffering. Through this brief teaching, Bahiya was immediately enlightened. Any of you? Same teaching. He wasn't a monk. He hadn't even given any dana. You've given lots of dana. You know, you've been restrained, you've been keeping precepts, you've been meditating. How come he got enlightened so quickly? Let's find out. In his previous life, Bahiya was a monk under the Buddha Kassapa. How many Buddhas have we had on this planet Earth? It's a nice question. See how much. How many? I had number 1, number 5. What else? Any other suggestions? Should I do what I did yesterday, that anybody who gets the right answer can get a free haircut? That's the prize. Now this is the third Arahat of this cycle. This one, Siddhartha Gautama. And before that was Kassapa. And so this was kind of like what they call a fortunate eon. There would always be Buddhas. Sometimes there would be long, long periods when the Buddhas don't exist. But there's always another one will come later on. It's the nature of the world. And this was the previous Buddha, the Buddha Kassapa. So in his previous life, Bahiya was a monk under the Buddha Kassapa. And together with 6 other monks, he climbed a steep mountain, throwing away the ladder, and determined to remain on top of that rock until they became enlightened or died. People always try these really crazy things. Enlightenment or death. And what usually happens? Yes. but not for all of them. One of the 7 monks became an arahat, another became an anagami, the second stage of enlightenment, just underneath, just below the arahat. We call them a non-returner. And a non-returner never gets reborn into this world, goes into a very, very high heavenly realm, and then goes into enlightenment from there. They're a non-returner. But the interesting thing about the non-returners, they often can just make a brief visit to this world. And often they come to visit this world to see some old friends from a previous life, as we'll soon see or hear one of those events. And in another sutta I would like to read out later, is another case of a non-returner who came to see even our Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. So, the second one became an anagami, and the non-returner, the other 5 monks just died on the mountain. Bahia was one of the 5. In Bahia's final life, he was a sailor, successfully crossing the ocean 7 times. On the 8th voyage, he was shipwrecked, but managed to survive by floating ashore on a plank of wood. I don't know how many people know, but that was one of the main routes to take Indian goods over to Europe, and European goods into India. From the port of Soparaka, just north of Mumbai, they would only go during the rainy season, I think when they knew which way the winds were going, and that would actually manage to blow their ships in the correct direction. They'd come back another time of the year. And many of the Indian goods went to Europe by the south of the Red Sea, and then, that's right, the Red Sea, and then come back again. And that was a very well traversed route. And I also mentioned that there are many artifacts of some of the Indians who actually traveled that route many couple of thousand years ago. And there are some of their graves over in Lower Egypt. And those graves have Dhammachakas, the Buddha wheels, are on their headstones. Or they have Buddhang Savanang Gacchami, Dhammang Savanang Gacchami, Sanghang Savanang Gacchami. These were Indian Buddhists who traveled to Lower Egypt over 2,000 years ago. And they lost their lives there. But nevertheless, they made it to get there. So anyway, there was Bahia, that he did 7 journeys across the ocean, and on his 8th, the shipwreck made him have to swim or grab onto a piece of wood to survive. Having lost all his clothes in the shipwreck, he made temporary garments out of bark and went begging for food in the town of Suparika. And the townspeople were impressed with his appearance and offered him food, respect, and even a costly set of clothes. When Bahia refused the new clothes, the people esteemed him even more, and Bahia had gained a comfortable living and so did not return to sea. The people regarded Bahia as an arahat. Soon Bahia thought he was an arahat too. I don't know how many of you have been to India, and sometimes the people love seeing people hardly dressed, so sitting meditation on the street, and they will give you alms food. Because, have you ever done that, gone to India and seen these really strange people? And anyway, that happened to me once. The other monks will tell you what happened, that we were visiting the holy sites in India, and it was in Lumbini, Nepal, but just so close to the border it didn't matter. In Lumbini, that it happened to be the full moon day. So I knew how to chant the Patimokkha rules, which we have to do if there's 4 or more monks, and there were 4 of us. So I said I could do it. It was a bit tough because I hadn't practiced it for a long time. So then we sat down around one of the Bodhi trees in Lumbini, and there I started chanting, and chanting and chanting. It took about 50 minutes. I had my eyes closed so I wouldn't be distracted. And then when I finished the chant, just chanting really, full on all the time, then I found that someone had put an offering, a gift in front of me. And the gift was some money, which I couldn't accept. And the other part of the gift was some ganja, drugs, because that's what they used to offer to sadhus in India. And so I saw how easy it was to convince some people you were holy. And all I was doing some chanting, that's all. And so, but because of that, because I was really focused, that was actually what was offered to me. And so I told someone else to take the money. I know one of my monks, he is a young man, and he said, well, what about the ganja? I said, well, just throw it away. Do I have to? He said. Yes. So anyway, you can understand that how if you just wear bark because you've got nothing else to wear, and if you act a bit strange and you say you don't want any clothes, people would assume that you must be a specially holy person. And so that's when he was given food, and it was a nice, easy life. So that's how he continued on. And when people thought he was living so simply with hardly any possessions, they even had more faith in him, and they started calling him an enlightened being. At that point, a deva, a heavenly being, discerned, got to know the wrong thought of Bahia, and, out of compassion, reprimanded him. That heavenly being was none other than his former fellow monk, one of the 7 who climbed up the mountain with him. He was the one who had become an anagami, a non-returner. A non-returner can know the old friends they had in their life before. And so that one who had become an anagami, it is of interest to add that the remaining 4 fellow monks were also reborn at this time, and they all, like Bahia, eventually attained full enlightenment. And just if anybody wanted to know, I wrote it down in this little article. They were Pukusati, Sabya, Kumara Kassapa, and Dabba the Malian. A good example of their lives in their last life, like Dabba Malaputa, usually called Dabba the Malian. He got fully enlightened after he died up on the mountain, and I don't know where he went for a while, but then when he got reborn in this world, he got enlightened when he was only 7. So how can a young man become enlightened when he's only 7? Obviously because of his previous life. He was so determined and had a bit of understanding. He went up the mountain and sort of died up there. But I always remember the story of Dabba the Malian. he occurs very many times in the Vinaya of the monks, because he was very young, just a kid, when he became fully enlightened. And he also developed some of the special powers. And one of the powers which he developed, he could light his finger. So his finger could glow in light, especially in the darkness. And he helped around all the monastic settlements in Rajgir, places like the Vulture's Peak, like the Bamboo Grove. All those little settlements were around the area of Rajgir. And what he would do, he would volunteer to be the guest monk. So if any monk arrived, he would know which places were free and clean, and so the monks would go and stay there, and he'd help them find the place, because it may be the first time they'd ever gone there. How many of you, when you came here for the first night or first day, you hadn't been to Jhana Grove before? But fortunately, you didn't need Freddie or Della to light their finger to show you the way. We have electricity here. But for Dabba remember this is in the time of the Buddha, that was a wonderful gift he could have to help the monks find the way, not get lost, or not so trip on any rock or a snake or anything. And Dabba the Malin soon became so well known that some monks would deliberately arrive late at night on purpose. Why? Because they wanted to see this magic power of having a finger which lit up. So then they're going to arrive early. He said, "No, wait for a while, other monks. We're going to arrive late." And he'd always take them with his lit finger to where he would need it to be. And that was Dabba Malaputa. And also, when Dabba the Malian eventually passed away, that he rose into the air, his old age, and they say entered the fire element and self-immolated, and his ashes just fell onto the ground afterwards. And that's exactly the way, according to the commentaries, the Venerable Ananda, the Buddha's chief disciple, chief attendant, was looking after the Buddha for 25 years, how he eventually passed away. By this time, he was very, very popular. And by this time, Buddhism was very popular. And there was two big kingdoms. They were following him, trying to convince him to die in their capital. Because if they died in their capital, they would get pilgrims going there for centuries afterwards. Just like, where did the Buddha die? In Kusinara. And so that the people around Kusinara, can sort of have pilgrims going there to this day. It's a very good income for the region, almost for centuries. So they both wanted him to die in their location. So what he did, Ananda, he went to the kingdom in the middle of the river, separating the two kingdoms in a boat, rose up into the air and immolated, almost burst into fire. And he determined that 2 piles of ashes would fall on either side of the river in equal proportion. And that's what happened. Otherwise there would be a war. It's very interesting. If anybody becomes holy, you've got to be very careful where you die. They won't let you alone. Anyway, that was Dabba the Malin. I love stories like that, I must admit. These are stuff which you read, and they're in there somewhere. Oh, and also, if there's anyone ever knows anybody who knows ancient Greek, remember when we went up to, again, the Chinese university in Shatin, and in that hotel there was this professor, what was his name? He was teaching at the Chinese university in Hong Kong. Not this last time, the time before. It must be Westerner, yeah. I met lots of you, but he was one of the professors there, and we had lunch with him. And he was, I just was asking what he's doing up there, and he was doing a lot of research into ancient Buddhist history, and especially that era, because he was a Westerner, on its influence on Greek philosophy and traditions. And I remember reading this one event from ancient Greek time in Athens. There was this fellow called Samana Tejas, if I recall that correctly. And Samana, that's the name for a monk. And he created a sensation in Athens, in the forum. That's what they say, it's a sensation. It must mean something really weird. By self-immolating, rising into the air and bursting into flame. And it's just mentioned in passing, and I thought, my goodness, that sounds so similar to Dabamala Puta, Dabamalian, and even Ananda. Was this one of the monks who had travelled to India? So one of the monks who had actually travelled from India to Greece, and there was quite a few Greek monks. So anyway, that's something I'd love to find the answer to, but then I don't think he's working at the university anymore. Anyway, that's a byline. This is supposed to be a sutta class. Anyway, then the Anagami Deva, one of Bahiya's friends, informed Bahiya about a true arahat. All the local villagers said he was an arahat, but he wasn't. And this Anagami said, well, actually there is a real arahat alive today, called the Buddha, living at that time on the other side of India at Savatthi. Bahiya immediately left Suparika, which is present-day Sopara, just north of Mumbai, and reached Savatthi, just 17 kilometers west of Balrampur, in only one night. Many of you have been to Savatthi, in the Ganges Valley. Many of you will know the distance is a couple of thousand kilometers. In one night he reached there. Bahiya met the Buddha while he was on alms round and asked for a teaching. The Buddha at first refused, for it was an inappropriate time. But on being asked a third time, the Buddha interrupted his alms gathering and gave the famous teaching presented above. And within seconds of hearing that Dhamma, Bahiya was fully enlightened. A few moments later, the Arahat Bahiya was killed by a cow with calf. So Bahiya's background was exceptional. He had been a monk under the previous Buddha Kassapa. His powers of determination were so strong that he went to meditate on the mountain with the resolve to become enlightened or die. In this life, he could actually hear Deva speak to him, and he could travel more than halfway across India, some 1,300 kilometers, as the levitator flies, I wrote, not as the crow flies, because this was an arahat to be, as in a direct line, in only one night. It's a long distance for one night, 1,300 kilometers. And if you had such a background from your previous life and had such psychic powers already in this life, then perhaps you too would have been enlightened when you heard Bahiya's teachings a few moments ago. It's not just the words, it's the backgrounds and the depth from which you can understand them. It is usually the case that one requires very deep samadhi, jhana, to achieve such psychic powers. Certainly, Bahiya would have had a predisposition for meditation, taking account of his previous life, and the psychic power of what is now called the divine eye that enabled him to hear the deva, and the other psychic power that enabled him to travel so fast, suggests that he was practicing the jhanas before he heard the deva. Perhaps this was another reason that he thought himself an arahat, but there is more evidence to suggest that, though it was not mentioned in the text, Bahiya had been practicing jhanas. What does jhana mean? That's the eighth factor of the Eightfold Path, Samma Samadhi. I'm not going to call it right concentration. I think that's a terrible translation and has hindered many people for many decades. Right stillness. It's the deep stillnesses which I'll describe in detail later on this retreat. It's quite likely that Bahiya had been practicing some of these. I know there was another man, male, that even when he was only 6 years of age, amazingly he entered the jhana, the first jhana, so easy. Have you heard of that one? A little kid, only 6. His name was Siddhartha Gautama. Before his enlightenment, he was sitting under a tree while his father was ploughing the field, doing a ceremony, and he spontaneously entered these jhanas. Why do you think? When I teach the next sutta, Gatikara Sutta, all will be revealed. I like actually just winding you up so you look forward to the answer to these riddles in the next sutta. You know, sometimes when I was a kid, we used to go to these Saturday morning pictures in the cinema, and they always had these detective shows or something like a Batman series, and you always, at the very, very end, the hero was just about to die. How could he escape? So you have to wait for next week to go again. It's just a way to get you to go every week to these Saturday morning pictures for the kids. So I learned that when I was a kid. It's a great marketing tool. So you'll learn exactly what I mean by tomorrow, the Gatikara. Anyway, but there was more evidence to suggest that though he was not mentioned in the text, Bahiya had been practicing the deep meditations. And this is that few people are aware that the very same teaching that here I call Bahiya's teaching was also given by the Buddha to the old monk Malunkyaputta. This is what happens when you read these suttas and you say, hey, I've heard that before somewhere, and you can combine these things together to give like a fuller meaning. The Venerable Malunkyaputta approached the Buddha and said to him, Venerable Sir, it would be good if the Buddha would teach me the Dhamma in brief, so that having heard the Dhamma from the Buddha, I might dwell alone, secluded, diligent, ardent, and resolute. Malunkyaputta, what should I say to the young monastics when an old monk like you, come to the last stage of life, asks for me for an exhortation in brief? Although, Venerable Sir, I am old, let the Buddha teach the Dhamma in brief. Perhaps I may understand the meaning of the Buddha's statement. So the Buddha consented. What do you think, Malunkyaputta? Do you have any desire, lust or affection for objects of sight that you have not seen and never saw before, that you do not see and would not think might be seen? No, Venerable Sir. Do you have any desire, lust or affection for those sounds cognizable by the ear, for those odors cognizable by the nose, for those tastes cognizable by the tongue, for those tactile objects cognizable by the body, for those mental phenomena cognizable by the mind, that you have not cognized and never cognized before, that you do not cognize and would never think might be cognized? No, Venerable Sir. Hear, Malunkyaputta, regarding things seen, heard, sensed and cognized by you. In the seen, there will be merely the seen. In the heard, there will be merely the heard. In the sense, there will be merely the sensed. In the cognized, there will be merely the cognized. That's the Bahi's teaching again. When Malunkyaputta, regarding things seen, heard, sensed and cognized by you, in the seen there will be merely the seen, in the heard merely the heard, in the sense there will be merely the sense, in the cognized there will be merely the cognized. Then, Malunkyaputta, you will not be by that. When Malunkyaputta, you are not by that, then you will not be therein. When you, Malunkyaputta, you are not therein, then you'll be neither here nor beyond nor in between the two. This is the end of suffering. I understand in detail, Venerable Sir, the meaning of what was stated by the Buddha in brief. Having seen a form with mindfulness distorted. So this is actually the explanation of Bahi's teaching. Having seen a form with mindfulness distorted, attending to the pleasing sign, one experiences it with infatuated mind and remains tightly holding to it. Many feelings flourish within, originating from the visible form. Covetousness and annoyance as well, by which one's mind becomes disturbed. For one who accumulates suffering thus, Nibbana is said to be far away. Having heard a sound, smelt an odor, enjoyed a taste, felt a contact, known an object, with mindfulness distorted, for one who accumulates suffering thus, Nibbana is said to be far away. When mindfulness is without hindrances, one is not excited by lust for whatever is seen. One experiences it with a dispassion and does not remain holding it rightly. One fares mindfully in such a way that even as one sees and experiences of feeling, suffering is exhausted, not built up. For one dismantling suffering thus, Nibbana is said to be close by. When mindfulness is without hindrances, one hears a sound, smells an odor, enjoys a taste, feels a contact, knows an object. One is not excited by lust for objects. For one diminishing suffering thus, Nibbana is said to be close by. The Buddha replies, Sadhu, Malunkyaputta. Even the Buddha says sadhu. Means really well done, great, yes, marvelous, awesome, as I sometimes say in English. Awesome, Malunkyaputta. It is good that you understand the meaning of what was stated in brief. Then Venerable Malunkyaputta, delighted and rejoiced in the Buddha's words, rose from his seat and after paying homage, keeping on his right, departed, and later, dwelling alone, secluded, diligent, ardent and resolute, the Venerable Malunkyaputta by realizing it for himself with direct knowledge in this very life, entered and dwelt in that unsurpassed goal of the holy life. He directly knew, destroyed his birth. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more rebirth. And the Venerable Malunkyaputta became one of the Arahats. That's what links the two together. However, let's see another link between this. Malunkyaputta also appears in the 64th Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, one of my favorite ones, where the Buddha begins by scolding Malunkyaputta for his wrong view. He must have been much younger in this sutta. Then teaches the necessity of attaining at least one of the jhanas in order to know what the 5 lower fetters really are, and then relinquish them. The Buddha said in front of Malunkyaputta that it is impossible to achieve non-returning, let alone full enlightenment, which is beyond non-returning. It is impossible to achieve these things without a jhana, just as much as it is impossible to reach the heartwood of a tree without first going through its bark and sapwood. The Buddha in Malunkyaputta Sutta, Majjhima 64. There is one path only, Ananda, one way to there is one path only, Ananda, one way to the abandoning of the 5 basic fetters. It is impossible that anyone can understand or abandon these 5 basic fetters without relying on that path, no more than it is possible to cut out the hardwood from a tree, without cutting through its bark and sapwood. What is the path? The 4 jhanas and the first 3 immaterial attainments. So Venerable Malunkyaputta was taught the necessity of jhanas, and then later he was given Bahiya's teachings. After hearing Bahiya's teachings, dwelling alone, withdrawn, diligent, ardent, and resolute, Malunkyaputta soon became an Arahat. It is therefore certain that Malunkyaputta achieved the jhanas before Bahiya's teaching could be effective, or else the Buddha would be blatantly inconsistent. It also adds weight to the inference that Bahiya also had experience of the jhana before he heard the same teaching. Otherwise he would have reached the heartwood of the tree without going through its bark and sapwood. So what did Bahiya and Venerable Malunkyaputta see in the Buddha's words that generated the Arahat experience? What does it mean? In the seen will be merely what is seen. What it means is to see without any distortion of the data, without adding or subtracting from it. As modern psychology knows, what comes to our attention as the seen has already been sifted and distorted by desires and aversions. This process of distortion occurs prior to the event of cognition. It is impossible to see this process as it occurs. It is subconscious. We can only infer its occurrence. We discover that our preferences have embellished the data to present to our mind what we wanted to see, while hostility has denied any access to the mind for those features that we didn't want to see. What we see is really merely the seen. That which we see with bare attention is seldom the truth. It's not the way things are, it is only the way things seem. And a good example of that, I think many of you know my background when I was in Cambridge. The first Buddhist I ever met, I'm very fortunate, he was Bernard Carr. And Bernard Carr, he was also into theoretical physics. He became a close associate of Stephen Hawking, a very good friend. And he was also the president, the last few years, the president of the Psychic Research Society in Cambridge and then London. We used to go around hunting ghosts together, literally, not out of fear, because we were both scientists. This was real phenomena. We want to find out, what are they? Why are they? Can we take photos of them? Why is it so hard to get photos of them? We wanted to use the phenomena of ghosts. There's plenty of ghosts in UK. We want to find out exactly what they are. One thing which we found out, which I will share with you, and it's important to know this is scientific evidence, researched over 100 years by people like Professor Bernard Carr, emeritus professor now, he's old, emeritus professor of theoretical physics at London University. And one of the things which we found out, there's no record at all of a ghost ever hurting another human being. They can't harm you. He said it's weird that sometimes you may be in a room and things are flying through the air and smashing against the wall. You may have seen or heard of such phenomena. Sometimes in the West they're called poltergeists. But you may have eggs coming out of the fridge and smashing against the wall. And they just leave the big mess of a broken egg against the wall. It's like somebody threw it at you. But they can't hit you. It's weird. There's never been any case over 100 years of research of these phenomena ever harming a living human being. It can make you really scared, but that's the worst they can do. But anyway, one day he told me about this experiment which they did on the levitating flower pot. Have you ever seen levitation? He wanted to prove it. And this was done in Imperial College in London. It's a top university. And the fellow who was going to demonstrate it was a well-known physicist. And he got some of his friends to come and see levitation. This was like his peers in the physics community in London. And had many of these old professors, experimenters, lecturers, the well-known authors were watching. When this guy, he brought in a flower pot, just carrying it, and just put it on the laboratory bench. And once he put the flower pot on the bench, he said, you can check it out if you like, there's no strings or anything. And I'm going to now levitate it, make it rise into the air. And he said, this will be wonderful if I can prove this. Not to just any old people, but to scientists, to show that levitation can happen. And so, have a look if you wish, but he also had, these days, many of the universities, especially in the West, have these state-of-the-art cameras, videos, ultraviolet, infrared, every type you can possibly imagine. They have the resources and they have the wealth to loan this equipment to him. So I had it all going and asked everybody to watch carefully as he was about to levitate the flower pot. And then he said, one of the most important parts of this demonstration, I need each one of you now to start doing some chanting. Simple chanting. I want you all to start chanting the Hindu holy word of Om. And everyone, even these professors who were so skeptical, didn't believe in anything unless you could actually prove it, they all started chanting Om, Om, Om. None of their students would ever believe that these professors would ever do anything like that, chant a Hindu holy word. But they did that, they chanted Om, Om, Om. And as they were chanting Om and the cameras were rolling, the flower pot rose in the air. It did, it worked. And then he asked them to stop the chanting, and then it actually dropped down to the ground slowly. And it was videoed, photographed, so many different angles. He said, I wanted to make sure there was proof. But then, two of the professors who were there watching with their open eyes said it did not lift above the table. It was on the table all the time. You guys were fooled. We saw it. It was on the table all the time. And they showed them the pictures and the videos. Look, it lifted above the table. No, it didn't. That was faked. And then the experimenters, they were happy. The experiment had worked. And they explained what had really happened. What had really happened, a very simple solution. A very strong electromagnet had been installed under the bench in the lecture theatre. And to be able to levitate a heavy flower pot needs a very, very strong electric current. And if you turn on a strong electric current, you can hear its noise. It starts to buzz, because that's the frequency of alternative current. And they need to go Om, 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 to hide the sudden noise which had appeared in the lecture theatre, which if they didn't go Om, 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 they'd have guessed what was happening straight away. But it did levitate. But because the purpose of the experiment was not about levitation, it was about how perception works. If something is so impossible that scientists, physicists have spent their whole life teaching the laws of science, see those laws of science sort of confounded, gone against, they can't even perceive it. That was the main purpose there. People who have been trained as experimental physicists to always be aware and to notice. It was so impossible for them to believe that something as heavy as this flower pot could levitate up into the air. It was so impossible, goes against everything they believed. They could not see it. It blocked from their awareness, even before they knew it. And that's why I always thought that was one of the most brilliant experiments on perception. Deceived even trained scientists. So that's what means by the distortion of the data. We don't know it's happened. We see what we want to see, and we just cannot see what goes against our worldview. And the Buddha explained that is something which he called the 5 hindrances. that distort perception and corrupt thinking. He called the 5 hindrances the nutriment that feeds delusion, avijja. When we get to dependent origination, it always Buddha says one thing causes another. He traces it all back to delusion. He never actually says what causes delusion. Why can't people see the truth? And he said, instead of saying causing, what feeds delusion, makes delusion strong, is the 5 hindrances. The first of the hindrances is sensual desire, what we want to see. That feeds delusion. It often embellishes the truth. It prevents to our consciousness the product of wishful thinking. As a guy, before I became a monk, he wondered, now why does that girl look attractive? And then I like to, going back in history, and in all of those, not museums, but art galleries where they painted attractive women. And I looked at them, they weren't attractive, not to me. Have you ever noticed that, especially in Western culture, all of those people who were really supposed to be attractive were fat? And so some poor ladies, I told them, well, you're pretty, you're just born in the wrong age. You'd be drop dead gorgeous 100 years ago. And I remember one of the supermodels, when I was growing up, was this lady called Twiggy. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but she was so thin. And she wasn't attractive at all. Other people said she was, but she was all skin and bone. And she became supermodel. What is beauty? It's just you seeing what you want to see. And you're just denying anything which upsets you. These are embellishing and changing the truth. That's ill will, is that with negative impulse that blocks us seeing, hearing, sensing or cognizing what we don't want to know. It blinds us to what is unpleasant and to what is contrary to our view. Psychology knows the second hindrance as a process of denial. The third hindrance is sloth and torpor. This does not distort what we hear, see or cognize. It doesn't distort it, it buries it in a fog so that we are unable to discern clearly. The fourth hindrance is restlessness and remorse, which keeps our senses on the run, so fast that we do not have sufficient time to see, hear, sense or cognize fully. Sights do not have time to fully form on our retina before the back of the eye has another sight to deal with. Sounds are hardly registered when we are asked to listen to something else. The fourth hindrance of restlessness, and a special case of remorse, which is inner restlessness due to bad conduct, is like the over-demanding boss in your office, who never gives you enough time to finish a project properly. And the fifth hindrance is doubt, which interrupts the gathering of data with premature questions. Before we have fully experienced the seen, heard, sensed or cognized doubt interferes with the process, like a cocky student interrupting the teacher with a question in the midst of the lecture. You should now be able to appreciate that it is these 5 hindrances that distort perception, corrupt the thinking, and maintain a deluded view. It is also well known amongst the serious students of Buddhism that the only way to suppress these 5 hindrances, to lessen them, to weaken them, is through the practice of jhana. As it says in the Nalakarpana Sutta, that's the 68th Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, in one who does not attain the jhana, in one who does not attain a jhana, the 5 hindrances, plus discontent and weariness, invade the mind and remain. Anything less than the jhana is not powerful and lasting enough to suppress the 5 hindrances sufficiently. So even if you are practicing bare mindfulness, people think they're practicing bare mindfulness with 5 hindrances still active at a subconscious level, you are not seeing things as they truly are. You are seeing things as they seem, distorted by the 5 hindrances. How do we practice bare awareness here? Those of you with bears, can you hold them up? You got a bear? Yeah. That's how I practice bare awareness here. Give everybody bears they can cuddle. That's much more effective than what other people call bare awareness. They're not having bare awareness because a lot of times we have come under the habit of distorting, seeing what we want to see and not seeing what's really there. Anyway, the final part of Bahya's teaching. Oh my goodness, I don't like much more. The final part, the finale. Are you ready? Or should I do what I've already promised to do with other things? Leave it till tomorrow? You want me to leave it till tomorrow? It's only half a page, crikey. Bahya. You should train yourself thus. In the seen will be merely what is seen. In the cognized will be merely what is cognized. Practicing in this way, Bahya, you will not be because of that. When you're not because of that, you'll not be in that. When you're not in that, you will not be. You'll be neither here nor beyond nor in between the two. Justice is the end of suffering. What does that mean? You'll not be because of that. Okay, this is a bit technical, but nevertheless. The part in natena is the instrumental of the word for that. Nat is negative. It means literally not because of that, not through that, not by that. It means in essence you will not assume there is a self, a soul, a me because of, through or by the seen or the heard or the sense or the cognized. The Buddha is saying that once you have penetrated the truth of sensory experience, by suppressing the hindrances through jhanas, you will not see that there is no. You will not see there is no doer nor a knower behind sensory experience. Just because you experience doesn't mean there's a doer and a knower there. No longer will you be able to use sensory experience as evidence of a self. Descartes' famous "I am because I think" is refuted. You will not be because of thinking, nor because of seeing, hearing or sensing. In the Buddha's words, you will not be because of that, any sensory experience. When the sensory processes are discarded as tenable evidence for a self, a soul or a me, then you are no longer located in the sensory experience. It's not where you are. In the Buddha's words, you will not be in that. You will no longer view, perceive, or even think that there is a me involved in life. In the word, please, I'm showing my age here. You are, in the words of the Doctor in the original series Star Trek, which I used to watch when I was a kid. It is life, Jim, but not as we know it. Does any of you remember that? Or similar things? Maybe I should take that out later. Any Star Trekkies? Anyway. There is no longer any sense of self or soul at the center of experience. You are no more in that. And just to close a loophole, that you might think you can escape non-existence of a self or soul, by identifying with a transcendental state of being, beyond what is seen, beyond what is heard, sensed or cognized, the Buddha thunders. And you will be neither here, with the seen, heard, sensed or cognized, nor beyond, outside of the sense, seen, heard, sensed or cognized, nor in between the two, neither of the world nor beyond the world. The last phrase comprehensively confounded the sophists. In summary, the Buddha advised both Bahia and Venerable and now you, to experience the jhanas, to suppress the five hindrances. Thereby one will discern with certainty the absence of a self or a soul behind sensory processes. Consequently, sensory experience will never again be taken as evidence of a knower or a doer, such that you will never imagine self or a soul at the center of experience, nor beyond, nor anywhere else. Bahia's teaching put in a nutshell the way to the realization of no self, anatta. Just this, concluded the Buddha, is the end of suffering. Just the last little paragraph. Enlightenment requires all of the Noble Eightfold Path. It requires faith in the Triple Gem, the keeping of precepts and the practice of dana. There's only one path to Nibbana, and that is the Noble Eightfold Path. There are no shortcuts. That's Bahia's teaching. Was that too long or too deep? Or just right? Excellent, great. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Excellent. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. I don't know that. I know the last time I gave this in London, actually in Oxford, many people said, "Have you got any copies of this? Can I email this to you, Della, and maybe you can print out a little sheet and then distribute it later on?"
I'll just email to go.
Okay, great. Okay, done. Deal. Thank you. Okay, so now I advise you just to carry on meditating. If you're tired, have a rest. And we have some interviews now, starting at 4:15. Excellent, great. It's now 6 minutes past. Good. Okay, please, you can bow and go. I'm just going to download it so I can email you. Which one, Della? Which email do you prefer? Della Chu? Bifacia, okay. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Asia. Oh, don't have to go, just the email, it's fine.
Okay.
Ja, thank you.
Oh. Hey. Did it? There should be in your email. No.
Okay.
If it's not, let me know.
I'll send to everyone and Takita.
Yeah.
So she can distribute to the interview.
Quite likely it's not on there because I'm not very good. It's so easy to press the wrong button.
Oh, no, I can forward to her.
Okay, great.
I have her email.
Okay. Do you have that little adapter? Goes in? Thank you. Is that okay?
Yeah. That's magnificent. Thank you so much. Is there a yarn? No. Take that and put it, just look after it.
Yeah, put it in my room. I don't know if it's open.
Oh, it's open, okay.
Because I'm doing the interview now. It's not open, just put it on the table outside. I didn't do anything wrong. What's that for? Oh. I was wondering what it was that for.
Just leave it here.
No, you leave it there, yeah.
That's okay. It won't bump the
Yeah.
emergency. No file.
Yeah, there's no fires this weekend.
Use this stuff.
Thank you.
Ajahn can have.
Oh, yeah.